Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to tell you about this sword right here. This is the Windlass Royal Armories Wakefield Hanger, a $500 sword from the folks at Windlass Steelcrafts. And this video, I'm going to go over bits and bobs, fits and features. I'm going to move it around, talk about that. Then I'm going to cut with it, do normal cutting. Eventually, I'm going to push it to failure, and I'll bring you along for the journey. The goal here is to help you decide if this is worth your hard-earned money or not, and to arm you with the information to make a good decision. This is $500 from the folks at Windlass Steelcrafts. And for that, you do get a sword. It'll look better than this one, because this one has been through it. You get a wood core scabbard, you get a nice little display case, a certificate of authenticity, an elevated package, but I'll talk about that in just a moment. Anyway, the gist is you get a lot for 500 bucks, and I'm gonna go over all the stuff. Before I do though, there are some caveats and disclaimers. One, it's a review sample. I didn't spend any money on it. If you think that makes me biased, you know right away. And two, I don't know how to move this around in any kind of historical system. I called that out in a lot of videos, but this is probably really important because this is supposed to be a one-for-one recreation, or at least as close as a one-for-one recreation can be for 500 bucks to an actual historical sword. And so if you were looking for something to study HEMA or study some sort of martial system that would have used this, then, well, I'm not going to provide you with a lot of insight in how accurate it is. But I do have measurements and all that kind of stuff in the description down below. If you're keen on it, take a look there. Anyway, on with the bits and bobs and fits and features. Now, I'm loath to do this, but it is worth calling out. This is the box from the Windlass Royal Armories line, and you note that it has this kind of, I don't know, it's not leather, but like almost like a fake leather coating, plastic leather or something like that on the outside of the box, but it's nice. It's not just simple cardboard. It also has generally some nice packing material in it. It came with a certificate of authenticity, some Renaissance wax. I'm calling this out because some people do care about boxes, and most of the time, well, I'm not one of them, and I think that this is money that I would rather have invested in the sword or just not spend at all. This is really an elevated presentation and beyond what I've seen typically from Windlass swords, beyond what I see from other swords in the $500 category. And if it matters to you, then, I mean, they've done, frankly, a very nice job with it. Dispensing with all the other yada yada, I'm going to move on to the bits and bobs and fits and features. And I'm going to start with the pommel right here. So first we have this, I don't know, little crow's beak looking pommel at the end. It has a flare on it that keeps your hand really locked in. And this grip is just enough to fit my big stupid sausage finger. So I can get a hand in here, but if I try to thrust into something and I need to pull away, I have a lot of purchase on this. It's not going to fling out of my hand. If I have a loose grip, it still stays pretty locked in there. So shape-wise, very, very functional. The other bit I can tell you is that it is peened. I can make out a peen. I can't get a fingernail on it. It's smoothed over really well. And while I notice it's there, it's generally very well constructed. I don't see any misplaced hammer marks or anything yucky. The material is made out of something that will rust. So do know that. I left this in my garage overnight in good condition, and it is now in patinated condition. So it will rust. I imagine that means you could clean it up too. Anyway, like the shape, haven't felt any hot spots using this in a bare hand. I later have a gauntlet to try to fit in this thing. We'll see how well that works because it's a pretty tight fit already. It then moves up to this grip here. Now, as I understand, Matt Easton had to take some artistic license in determining what the grip should be, and I think he nailed it. This thing feels really solid in my fingers. This little beak really locks my grip in already, and I don't need much more on the grip to have this tactile sensation of control. But these little ribs on here absolutely do that. My fingers lock between them, and I just feel 100% locked in. I don't think anyone could get this away from me. I think my grip is very secure. It feels good in the hand. Again, no hot spots, and it adds to the sense of control that I have in this sword, which is already, it like feels like a stick, but like a performance racing stick. Like I feel 100% in control, locked in, but it also feels like a twig as I move it in my hand. So like the grip shape, there's not a lot of dimension though. It's elliptical in a sense. It lets me index it, but there's no like swelling, tapering. It's pretty simple. And I'm glad, frankly, it is, because I already feel like I've got all the tactile, grippy goodness that I need here. And anymore, I think would just make it more busy than it needs to. So I think the design was quite solid. There's no schmutz or yucky bits or anything like that in terms of where the grip rests or where it meets the cross guard. I do see a little bit of a seam in one area here. It's not a big one, but I do notice it, and I can feel it in my bare hand. As I play around with it though, try to get a fingernail under it, I can't peel it back. That has been the case sometimes when I can feel the seam is if I play with it a little bit, it starts to unravel and come undone. That hasn't been the case, but we'll see how well it holds up. As it is, I've played with this some. I've cut with it already. I've used it throughout the seasons. It's had an opportunity to age some, and it still stayed together. Moving up to this crossguard, we have a kind of a D-guard over here, a little quillen on the back, and a nagel right here. What I immediately notice is the nagel doesn't look like it's going to fall off. And a lot of times on swords that have this little protrusion poking out, they're not secured in a way that makes me feel like they're going to do anything if I need them. This at least looks like it's molded in there in a way that is functional. I will test that again later. I have a guest star, a Zombie Tools Zanto, which is it's a Zakuzashi that I broke and now is shorter, and I'm going to whack the crossguard, and I'm going to take a gauntlet, and I'm going to punch into some stuff and see how well this D-guard and all of this Wangus holds together. Anyway, as it is, it seems to offer a fair bit of protection. I feel like I have a D-guard that's going to protect my hand. I feel like I could use it offensively because this feels like something I could get in close with. I might want to deliver a strike, and so we'll see how effective that is. This feels like it could catch something along the back. So yeah, lots of interesting stuff. And again, this nagel, if something were to ride down, it feels like it has enough there to potentially do something. There are swords in the $500 price point that have additions or hand protection on here that feel like they're going to fall off if you look at them wrong. So I appreciate that. It has this little spike that as it meets the crossguard, or as it meets the scabbard, there we go, words, I'm good. It rests in this little pocket in the scabbard, which I think for a $500 sword is just an addition that I appreciate. I believe this is on the historic sword. I'm glad to see it was kept, and I'm glad to see that they've made a scabbard that it rests well in. The next bit I look at is the gap in the crossguard. There is a gap. If I look down here, I can certainly see space, but it's generally pretty clean. Windlass is sometimes known to put a fair bit of space in there, and I don't see a lot of space here, so it's generally clean. I would say it's perfectly acceptable for a $500 sword, but also could be tighter. It's not what I'd expect to see in an Albion, but for a Windlass and a $500 sword especially, it's generally quite good. Before I move on to the blade, I'll talk briefly about the scabbard. Again, I noted it's leather covered. It has a seam that runs down the back, and the leather feels of a reasonable quality. It's a wood core, a little thicker perhaps than it needs to be, but not bad. And this chape at the end feels like I wouldn't want to get my bell rung with it. If I take this off and use this as like a sparring system, I feel like I could deliver a bop to the noodle that would be uncomfortable. The scabbard as well seems to allow the sword to fit either way. If I turn it either way, the sword can fit in, which I don't mind. If I were wearing this on a belt, it's nice to know that if I put it in the opposite way, that it fits and I don't really have to do anything. At the same time, the scabbard starts to look like it's a different sword than this one. So I don't mind it, but at the same time, I do have some, I don't know, it just doesn't look as pretty when it's in the scabbard than when it's out. The chape, as I mentioned, looks nice. I like that the leather is also coating the mouth ever so slightly. I can't see how the sausage is made so much. It has a fair bit of retention, so if I turn it upside down, it doesn't like immediately fall out. So if I bent over to pick something up, I wouldn't have to worry about it falling over and then reaching to grab it, but it's not very tight. I can immediately deploy it. I also think there's some, see right about here, it starts to grab. And so I don't know if there's like a push or a clip or something in there that's retaining it, but the tension seems to be around here. It also it has some rattle, but honestly not a lot. Generally speaking, this is all in all just a much higher level of fit and finish and attention to detail than I'm accustomed to seeing from Windlass. I have reviewed one other Royal Armories sword. It had a similar attention to detail. That's the impression I get from the line. So if you are looking for, basically if something in the Royal Armories line suits your fancy, then I believe this is, or I'm starting to believe anyway, this is the kind of finish that you can expect from it. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the blade, pointy stabby part, and there are some interesting bits to talk about here. We have an interesting shape, a fuller that runs along the spine, gradually petering out as we have this drop tip here. The false edge here is sharp, or it is now anyway. I don't know if it comes that way. Mine didn't come sharpened, but I've sharpened the false edge here. And then we have a primary edge. It also is like hollow ground a little bit, so there's a fuller here, but my example is slightly hollow ground up into this plane here is generally just a little bit hollow ground. It's subtle, but very pleasant. There are forging lines and the fuller wavers around. This seems like it's a hand-forged object. There's ripples in the edge, which are very likely for me, but along the surface, there are hammer marks. It's not as egregious as some Windlass stuff is, but there is a fair amount of it in here. This seems like a handmade object. It doesn't look the part when I hold it here, but when I look at it along the lines, the the lines kind of wiggle around just a little bit. So that would maybe be something you would see in history. Maybe it's on the originals. It wouldn't surprise me. I would like to see it be perfect and refined, but for $500, I will honestly take the other things that I'm seeing here, which brings me more to the dynamic side. But before I get to dynamics, I'll just wrap stuff up. It has this false edge, the fuller kind of peters off, and we have this kind of ridge line that runs all the way up to the tip. So the tip gets pretty thin, but it has a slight reinforcement from this ridge line that runs up the back, which I believe is going to help the edge not, or rather the tip not break when it well could. The blade has a fair bit of flex. It's reasonably rigid, but flexible for a short blade as well, or at least I can flex it. And interestingly, the blade node and well, the nodes basically are such that right where I'd want to cut is where the blade node is. It's seemingly a pretty well-designed sword, well executed, feels very comfortable in the hand. That brings me well into the conversation about dynamics, and this sword feels, as I mentioned, like a stick in the hand. It's light, it's lively, it moves exceptionally well. I don't feel like I can deliver much of a chop with it. It's not going to do the work for me, but I could absolutely deliver devastating cuts with this, and the tip and rigidity are sufficient to really be aggressive with the thrust. And I could deliver, if I were capable of, some cuts with the back edge if I had the dexterity to do so, which frankly I don't. Anyway, there's a lot going on here, and because it's so light and lively, I just feel like I could move it exactly where I want to, and I'm not going to lose it either. This handle really keeps me attached. It is a absolutely wonderful feeling sword in the hand. And if the kind of thing you like is the kind of sword that you pick up and immediately feels intuitive, this is one of those swords. And I'm immediately delighted by those things. I don't study how to use this, but I feel like as I go to cut some of these mediums, I might have a chance at not looking like an idiot. Anyway, that brings me to the cutting side of things. That's where we're going to go now. And I don't know how it's going to go. I have cut a few things with it after I was kind of testing the edge. I've had to test the edge a little bit. I screwed up the sharpening the first time around, but I can tell you thus far it has cut some water bottles and stuff quite sufficiently. We'll see how it holds up on some of these things. First, I'm just going to see if I can stab the noodle. All right, quasi-accurate with it. Let's try cut. False edge. Let's try that again. If I turn the sword around and use it then yeah. So the edge is capable, I am not. Just turn it around and try a few like this. What about up? I think I've proven it can cut pool noodles effectively enough. Now I'll point out, I don't usually have this happen. Cuts after I cut a container and having them stand here, not a typical thing for me. I have used this sword some, as I mentioned, but not a lot. So the fact that I can have the container stand is, well, unexpected. Water with some fabric over it. I'm not sure exactly how many layers it is, but we'll assume 2. Get cut through. I put some pants on the target just to see. Denim is a tough target to cut. I'll see how well it does. A slight cut in the pocket, but not a lot. I should have stabbed it. So what I've done so far is kind of the standard fare of targets. I don't have any plastic bottles around at the moment, but it sufficiently cut pool noodles, and it also cut jugs and that kind of thing reasonably well. I'm going to move well into the abusive territory now, so do know that this is abuse. Swords aren't supposed to do these things. Keep that in mind as you evaluate its performance. The next thing I'm going to do is just see, can I get it to bend? I'm going to slap it on my stand a few times, see how well it holds up. Disappointing. Immediately, it has taken a bend out here at the tip. That was not a delicate swing, but it was not a kind one, a particularly hard one either. And a few taps and I'm reasonably back to straight. I'm going to hit it hard now. Okay, again, pretty aggressive bend. Can straighten it out. I'm mostly back to straight. All right, so whacking the sword on the stand is not necessarily a realistic test, but if you can imagine you have this and you're batting somebody out of the way to deliver a strike, then that thing you're batting out of the way, if they're swinging it at you, well, could cause a similar kind of bend. And so that's, in theory, something kind of not entirely dissimilar to what I'm doing. It's not springing back into shape the way that I would expect a through-hardened blade to spring back into shape. So we'll see what happens with the rest of the cutting. But as I mentioned, I am going into the abusive territory. I'm going to put some protection on. First, we have a block of ice. I want to say the sword has bent a little more now. Surprising. All right, so what I can tell so far, the sword bends. It's holding its edge reasonably well, but it's bent on some of like the ice target. It didn't really bend, at least noticeably, on the large cardboard tube. All right, now I'm going to smack it into this log here. This log has caused edge damage on some swords. It's a hard wood. I don't exactly know what it is, but at the moment it's reasonably unfrozen. This bites really deep into it. Try a couple tip cuts. I feel the shock in my hand a fair bit doing that. I'm not feeling the shock doing this. That feels very comfortable, but hitting the tip, there's a fair bit of shock right into my pinky, right on the pommel there. It is uncomfortable. I'll try just thrusting into twisting the tip. Okay, so I thrust in a little bit. I do have a little bit of a hook now on the tip. The tip has bent over. This is a tricky one to try and unbend too. But man, it just bites really deep into this wood. Okay, so wood I've delivered. I'm going to hit it really hard now. All right, so I got some bending there. Back to straight. The guard, solid though. I don't have any wiggle or anything like that. The sword is still solid. It's just a little flexible out here towards the end. Cutting into logs, you might hit shields, something like that, pieces of wood. It's obviously abusive, but it is not the most abusive thing. I'm going to move into more abusive things is the point. All right. For the keyboard warriors out there, let's see, I made it past the shift key. I made it just to the question mark key. That's surprising. I didn't think it would cut that deep. Keyboard warrior. I mean, I probably lost some of the edge. I can make out some spots where it's kind of deformed, but not as bad as some other swords have on the same materials. That's thick plastic, thicker than most water bottles would be, and I've had things damage on hard plastic, and that's a fair bit of it, and there's metal bits in there. I'm not seeing any like nicks or chips, but I have lost the refined edge that I once had. Now, armor simulation. So close enough. Got a piece of sheet metal. It's not gonna go real well, but we're gonna see what happens. So first I'm gonna try and thrust into it just to see what happens with the tip. The tip rolled over and it skated across the surface. Not super glamorous there. Put a dent in it. I'm bending the sword, and I did not make a lot of progress in the sheet metal. It cut in not very much. Okay. So now the edge is pushed over slightly. I can make out where I hit it. There's very minimal damage on the edge. Also, gauntlet courtesy of Windlass. And fitting it in is a problem. Okay. So I can't hold it quite the way I normally do. I can kind of get in there, but let's see. First a punch. It's holding together. I think it's canted over and bent slightly, but it's holding together. So first, the nagel. I know it's probably not fair to hit it the wrong way, but if I stick the sword in and try to hit it down, then I have a helicopter of doom potentially, and it might bend in and diminish my ability to test it further. So okay, good. I hit it. I'm gonna go further out on the end. Not good. I have lost the nagel. It has broken off. I don't know where it is, so hopefully we find it later amongst the keys and stuff. Let's try this quillin. Okay, seems to be bending rather than breaking. Good sign. This fucking makes me nervous to do this, but so pound it in a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna swing hard. All right, so bending rather than breaking. I'm not sure how I hit the blade twice. I was aiming for here, but it must have gone in, and so I've diminished the cross section here with the Zombie Tools blade. I have hit the blade, and then I didn't think I did it twice though. I must have. But crossguard bends and doesn't break. All right, sword friends, I am losing the light, so I'm jumping to the croquet stake of doom rather than the tree. I think I've shown about as much as the tree would anyway, so jumping right to the croquet stake. Right away I'm seeing some pretty... The edge isn't breaking or chipping off, it's rolling over quite a bit though. Okay, I do want to point out I don't feel a lot of shock in my hand doing this, which is a nicety. The edge is soft though, and it's just rolling over. So that was 10 soft ones. I'm going to swing harder now. Lost something, hit me. I don't know what. Oh, chunk of the blade. Okay. Now this is hard, but I'm going to try and hit it on the spine. And this is a tricky one to do that with. Ouch. I'm going to stop because this hurts a lot. This back piece is hitting me in the hand, and I can't reverse it from my typical recipe of edge breaking as well. But in fairness, it seems not to be breaking. So, because this one is now hurting me sufficient enough to dictate I stop, and I don't see a smart way of getting it to break other than swinging really, 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 really hard. Ow! Which comes at some potential detriment. Also, I think I would get there though. The edge is great. I mean, I've got a pretty beefcake edge here that's diminishing, but the blade is still sufficient to generally be used as a weapon. I could straighten it out and still be something with this. Well, actually, let's do something new and exciting here. Like an anvil. So how about this? Smish between the croquet stake of doom and the zombie tools homemade aggressive thing. This is how Matt cut his femoral artery. How about now? Success! All it took was a little cameo from Zombie Tools. All right, we've successfully broken it, but admittedly, that was a humdinger. Sword friends, some immediate thoughts here. One, I'm very happy that I set up camera 2 today, and also I am impressed with this sword. It held up longer on the croquet stake of doom. This is a first. I have not had to break out the zakuzashi to aid in the croquet stake of doom. This thing usually eats swords for breakfast, and it held up exceptionally well. But I do want to diminish its credit just a little bit. Some caveats here. While I was cutting, I was unable to hit it with the same intensity I normally do on the spine of the sword, which is part of the recipe to break swords. The nature of its guard, and that I diminished the guard the way that I did, doesn't really allow me to get a lot of purchase. Would that have made a difference? I think so, but it's speculation at this point. The other bit that I would note is the blade was bending in this area, and I'm disappointed that it bent as much as it did, as quickly as it did, with as little effort as it took. But it was only bending in this one area here where this was. And I think that's because maybe through some removal of material, it got heated up or something like that in a way that took away some of the springiness. And what that means is that, more or less, I think it served really well in the test. I was not losing chunks of the sword. It was kind of like rolling over, and I was gradually diminishing the edge by hitting it, but through like a process of attrition, maybe. But I think that softening helped in terms of the durability. It not necessarily in a way that you'd want as a weapon, but in this particular test, it took a lot of shit, and that does deserve some praise. So I will say I am impressed. And what is left is, I don't know. It's a bag of weird, but the steel is on the softer side. Either way, it lasted as a weapon and would still let you do sword-like things for longer than it should have. This was a very, very fun sword to move around, and I'm sweating. It gave me some trouble to break. Tip of my hat, Windlass. All right, sword friends, you've seen close-ups of the bits and bobs, you've seen me move it around, you've seen me cut with it, you've seen me break it. Hopefully at this point you have enough information to decide if it's worth your hard-earned money or not. Do I think it's worth the $500 though is the next question. And the short answer here is yeah. I really like this sword. I am kind of tickled by swords that when I pick them up, they just feel a part of my hand. And that's what this one did. It also had it where it counts. The guard, granted, had an issue with the naggle, but the D guard actually held up really well to me punching logs and stuff like that. And it held up to being whacked with the zombie tools, which is no joke of a test either. The blade had a heat treatment issue and it bent. I'm not convinced all the swords are going to have that issue, but the blade also surprised me in how durable it was when I went to go break it on the croquet stick of doom. So it has a little bit of give and take. And for $500, I feel like this sword really held up well enough, and it did the things that it was supposed to do and didn't really start having problems until I was doing more abusive stuff with it. If I went in the backyard and just cut water bottles, pool noodles, that kind of stuff, I think I would have a lot of fun and I wouldn't have any really condition issues to speak of. But there's a lot going on with the blade. It's very pretty. It's a one-for-one recreation of a historic piece that seems to be reasonably faithfully reproduced. And when I pick it up, it just feels a part of my hand, and it makes me smile. For $500, that's hard to do. There are more and more swords out there for $500 that do that, but it's still a rarity, and this happens to be in that kind of exclusive club. So I think it's worth $500. This was just a really fun sword, but it does have some stuff that could be improved on. At the same time, I still think it's a really compelling value. You get the scabbard, you get a box if that matters to you, and you get a blade that can take an edge relatively well. And again, I didn't start seeing problems with the edge until I was doing some pretty dumb stuff. So I think there's maybe just some oddness with this particular one's heat treat. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I want to offer again a special thanks to the folks at Windlass for sending this my way. That's all I've got. Cheers, and thanks for watching.